every night, and I was getting no sleep, couldn't do anything else. And this went on for weeks. And finally I said, enough's enough. We either close this by this date or I'm out of here. And that pushed them into the close, and, worked with the bank. Every couple hours, my banker would call and she'd say, we haven't got the transfer yet.
This specific episode is very special because I'm going to be here interviewing our board member, my co-host, Michael Sawitz. And what people see him is he is an amazing board member. He gives a lot to the community, but what people don't know is the story behind it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Lillian.
So Michael, he is a CEO, which stands for
Chief Enthusiasm Officer
for StarTech Studios. And there you help entrepreneurs get their idea from ideation to funding to running, correct?
Right.
So let's talk about your journey, because I got to know him and I actually go to him for all my business advices. How did you get into business?
As a kid, every kind of business, selling my comic books, building models and selling the finished product.
And how old were you?
8, 9.
Okay.
13 years old, got my Social Security number, and was a paper boy. So running that business showed me how to build a business, and it gave me money in my own pocket. And that was intoxicating for a 13-year-old. That started the journey
Of entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And then you went into retail.
Yes. I always worked as a older teenager, always worked in stores. It was an easy job. My grandparents owned a grocery store, so I worked in their store in the summers. But later, I worked in bigger grocery stores and hardware stores. It was just retail in general, learning my chops.
So I remember you told me that you were a college dropout, and you were in the back of my mind, you were thinking, okay, so let me pursue this career, but I will always come back. And you never did.
No.
Tell us what that was like.
Well, for many years, my goal, my passion was to become a marine zoologist.
What's a marine zoologist?
I think of Jacques Cousteau.
Okay.
He was my hero. So I quit surfing to take up diving, got certified diver, spent a lot of time at the bottom of the ocean in preparation. So when it came time, I graduated high school, I went on to college to become a marine zoologist, and found out that was not the career path for me. That you got to be a master, get your master's degree, and you can clean out rabbit cages. You needed a doctorate. And, at 20 some odd years old, I was not about to wait that long. So I switched to a business major, changed schools, went to 𝗀𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗲 for a business major. And shortly after that, got offered a unique opportunity because I had been paying for my education by working in a retail store, a men's haberdashery back in the day. And I was approached by a group of investors to open a clothing store, a pants store back in the day. And so one of my investors was the highest paid actor in Hollywood at the time, Bill Bixby, that went on to be the first Incredible Hulk.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, Joanne Worley from Laugh-In, if anybody remembers Laugh-In, Joanne Worley and Goldie Hawn. And those were the kind of people that invested in what we were doing. And so I dropped out of college to become a partner in that and open the first store.
And you were early 20s, right?
I was 22 or 23 at the time, yeah.
So would you say that's an entrepreneurial experience? Because I know you have, when you have investors in, even though you could be a co-founder, you're also kind of working for someone. But that opened the door for you, right?
Yeah, it to me, I was always working for myself, right? It was gaining the knowledge because I'd never run a business that size before, had that kind of budget, those kinds of, reporting cycles. I had to teach myself all of that very quickly, and that's the basis for an entrepreneur. You learn on the way down, and when you jump off that cliff, how to build that airplane to keep from crashing and burning, right? Entrepreneurs jump off the cliff
Yes.
with raw materials and try to build something before they die.
I live by that. That quote is from Reid Hoffman.
Yeah.
Because one, I made a lot of mistakes in my entrepreneur journey. I'm not gonna lie about it. You know, I'm also human. But one of the biggest mistakes I've learned was to be so perfect, because that's coming from a place of fear. And guess what? I think it's, in my mind, I think it's right. I think it's perfect. You go to market, crickets, or it's too late.
Yeah. The one that I remember is progress over perfect.
Yes.
And that's what I used to tell the startups every week in our meetings at Fast Start Studio is if you're trying to make it perfect, you've waited too long. Get something that is the most basic essence of what you're trying to do and get it in front of customers. And you'll learn from their experience what needs to be changed to meet their needs.
So I want to go back to your story. So we did the fashion line, right? And then at one point you started a company with your wife and you franchised it and you sold it. So what was a turning point for you to leave fashion and then to start your own company?
Made a lot of money in the apparel industry. It was stupid money. I say I got paid like I was Michael Jordan, you know, in the rag business. The money was huge, but it also extracted a pound of flesh. I was gone all the time, always on a plane, always somewhere, and I had an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old at home. And after 15 or 17 years, my wife said, you know, we need a dad and a husband more than we need somebody to put food on the table. And it rocked me. So I started preparing for my next career. And that was a lot of research. This was before we had personal computers.
What year was this?
This was 83.
Okay.
So spent a lot of time in libraries with microfiche. You probably don't know what that is, but it's how they used to photograph printed material and you read it on a reel. And reading in books and what was the next trend. And I know that based on the 1980 census that mining and manufacturing were dead. Some other industries were flat or declining. The only positive I saw in that report was that the service sector was to grow by 10% over the next decade. So I started looking at service industries. That's when I came upon the business that we finally went in. And so I look at all the money that we earned as a way of buying myself out of indentured servitude, of getting out of that industry. And so if we failed, we failed. But we needed to try. And so in 1985, we opened our first store, October 22nd, 1985. And 10 weeks later, we were profitable. And we never looked back. The year after that, we opened the second store and then a third store. And that started our journey.
So you're making this sound very easy. It can't be easy.
Anything but. Anything but.
Because one thing that you said earlier that caught my attention, you said, the first thing you said was, I was working so much. I was traveling and I want to buy myself out of it. But we also know when you start a business, you put a lot of hours in. Yes. So what are the things that you've learned in the process of building the business, and how did it eventually becoming a franchise? And before we go into it, do you mind sharing what kind of business that you started?
Sure. I had early on started buying single-family residences. Instead of investing in a retirement fund or an annuity, my wife and I decided that we would invest in ourselves. So after we bought our second house, there was no furniture in the living room. We used to play handball off the walls until we could afford the furniture. But why we couldn't afford the furniture was we were taking money and investing in real estate. long term. So we're investing in ourselves versus some fund. And in doing that, it was a stretch because we had to learn the real estate industry and how to manage properties, manage people, how to manage our money. But it was a great experience. And later in life, it paid off because we all know what real estate has done,
yes,
especially in California. So that was enough to have an exit because those first investments, my first real estate commercial investment, I bought a single family dwelling for $54,500. Yeah, it's worth 1.2 now, right? It's been generating cash since year 3. So it's that kind of a thing where that could be an exit in itself if I sold all the real estate. But what that did was give me the courage to start other businesses because I had something to fall back on that we built ourselves.
You know what you remind me of? Have you watched Arnold Schwarzenegger Netflix documentary?
No, haven't.
So he did the same thing like you did. He came back with the American dream. He said he wanted to learn how to make money. He said all the wealthy people were buying real estate, so he did that. So before he became an actor, he was a bodybuilder. He was done with that, won enough awards, like, you ready for the next thing. But he's like, I was already real estate rich. And that gave him the courage. Well, not the courage, because he already had that mindset, but he just went in. Yeah, part of it is courage.
But I would say confidence versus courage, yes.
Because I remember in the document, he said, I was already a millionaire. While other people were struggling, I was going after the lead role. And that's how he was able to fly. Because now he's like, I'm not afraid of losing it all and go for what he wanted. But back to you. So you had the confidence.
The confidence is if I failed, I'd start over. It wasn't an end game. It wouldn't take me out. So there's the confidence, knowing that my family would not starve.
Yeah.
That we did build up millions in real estate, even though the business initially was like any other business. It was all negative, not positive.
Right.
And then after 3 or 4 years, instead of opening our own stores with our own money, we were convinced to start franchising, to open stores with other people's money, and to share the knowledge and the systems that we built that made us successful with others.
And this business that you're franchising, what kind of business is that?
So that was a retail business, retail service. So we rented mailboxes, we sold packing and shipping services, and it was what Mailbox, etc., and the UPS store became. But this was back in the beginning in 1985, and nobody knew what it was. In fact, I had people turn me into the post office because I was selling postage stamps. In my very first promotion, I sold postage stamps for less than the face value. And I had people go wild. I'm going to turn you in. This is illegal.
Wow.
No, I bought the product. I could sell it or give it away. But I used that to promote our business. Because the first week we opened, I stood there with nobody coming in. And I remember so clearly, and again, this was 1985, I was standing at the front counter, looking at the front door, waiting for that first customer to come in. And after must have been hours, I looked down, my knuckles, my hands were white as white, and I could barely get my hands off the counter. I did not know. I had a death grip on my front counter, and I was so manic about where are the customers, what did I do? Yeah. I put our money in this and nobody's coming in. And that's when I came up with the idea of offering postage stamps, which everybody needs back in the day because it was before digital, for less than the post office was selling them. And that primed the engine, and people started coming in and going, oh, what do you do? Oh, we do this, this, and this. It gave me a chance to do my 30-second pitch. And that built it. And from that first week of no one coming in, 9 weeks later, after 10 weeks, we were profitable, in the black, and we never looked back after that. But it was about having the courage to go out and get business, not waiting for it to come through that door like I did the first week.
Yeah. You use your thinking mind. You were creative with an idea, and it paid off.
Well, you're took those building materials, jumped off the cliff, and I was building the airplane before I hit the ground.
Yeah. And you said, you were convinced to franchise. When you say we were convinced, is it you and your wife? Did someone convince you? What was that?
It's kind of an ugly story. At the same time, new people in San Diego who had started the same kind of business. They were San Diego, we were OC, and we were friends. And the way that they built their business is they bought independents, a mom and pop shop. They bought them and then rebranded it under their brand. They had taken in investment money, and that's how they were growing. And they said, hey, we need to talk. Come down to San Diego. Went down and they said, we want to combine our stores in San Diego with your stores in Orange County, and together we can grow, and we'll be partners in this. And I said, terrific. I've been funding this all on my own. This is a way to really jump ahead. And as we got into the details, they said, of course, you'll pay royalty on your stores. I said, no, I'm not paying you royalty on my stores. I'll pay royalty on any new store we open together. But hey, these were mine. These are successful. You've come to me because of that success. I'm not going to pay you on that. And they said, well, then we don't have anything to talk about. So I thought about that all the way driving back up the 5 freeway, and I walked in the door, and Vicki said, well, what happened? And I told her, and she was quiet for a minute, and she said, well, I guess then we need to franchise ourselves. That was it.
And that's a good partnership right there. That's a good partnership.
So I studied franchising, and 2 years later, the state of California granted us registration, and that was like 89, and we built that into 124 franchise stores, of which ultimately we sold. That was my big exit.
And how much did you exit it for?
Well, we were doing $25 million a year at the time.
Right.
And so it was a multiple. I won't go into that. Doesn't matter. The matter was that we negotiated a number, and it was ugly due diligence. And it was very difficult because I couldn't tell anyone but my wife. And we had people with us for many years in the stores in corporate, and I couldn't tell them. And every night at 11 o'clock, a team of auditors would show up at my office and working through most of the night, going over our books every night. And I was getting no sleep, couldn't do anything else. And this went on for weeks. Mm-hmm. And finally I said, enough's enough. We either close this by this date or I'm out of here. And that pushed them into the close. And, worked with the bank every couple hours. My banker would call and she'd say, we haven't got the transfer yet. And then I would make a telephone call going, you guys got 4 more hours and I'm going to pull out of this. And finally she called and she said, well, it just hit your account, the first couple of $1 million. So I knew I had a deal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was ugly. It was one of the worst things I've ever gone through, other than court issues.
A word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back.
I would like to introduce you to our sponsors because without them, this podcast cannot exist. So our first sponsor is Reed Smith. Reed Smith is a globally recognized law firm helping founders navigate every stage of growth from formation and fundraising to scale and exit. Our next sponsor is Sunstone. They support entrepreneurship, education, and inclusive innovation by partnering with universities, nonprofits like us, accelerators, and public-private initiatives to create opportunities for the next generation of founders. And last but not least, we have Cloneforce.
Most companies today are still using AI as a point solution, writing copy, summarizing meetings, answering questions. That's useful, but it's still basically AI as a tool. What we're building at Cloneforce is really the next layer beyond that. We're building clones, persistent AI teammates that can actually operate across the tools a company already uses. So instead of another chatbot sitting off to the side waiting for a prompt, you have a digital worker with identity, memory, voice, context, and the ability to take action in the flow of work. What's powerful is that these clones can be shaped around a specific role or person. They can have the right knowledge base, the right skill set, the right tone, and they can work across chat, email, Slack, meetings, CRM, and other business systems. So they're not just there to assist, they can actually help execute and strategize. And from a platform standpoint, we're model neutral, tool neutral, and channel neutral. So we're not forcing customers into one model or one interface. We're giving them a command center for their AI workforce with the flexibility to use the best tools for each job and the governance layer to manage it all responsibly. For businesses, this changes the equation pretty dramatically. It means that you can scale execution, consistency, and responsiveness without scaling overhead the traditional way. You're not just buying software, you're deploying digital labor in a much more practical, controlled, and effective way. At a high level, we think the future of work is human-centered and clone-powered. Humans should be focused on judgment, relationships, and creativity, and clones should take on more of the repeatable cross-system execution that eats up so much time today.
Okay, so you sold the company because you decided that you found a passion in teaching.
Yes.
So let me ask you this, in your whole journey with, helping founders get funded, being on the board of TCVN, even in your whole journey of building the company, you mentioned a few words right now, ugly, ugly, ugly. This is what this podcast is all about because I'm here to learn. I made countless of mistakes myself, but if anything I've learned, it makes you stronger. It makes you wiser. So what are the top lessons that you have learned that you could share with me and all of our audience that's listening right now?
I would say the number of failures that I've had, the greatest reason was that I trusted the wrong people. It's who you surround yourself with. Now, it wasn't my partner, my wife, because we were partners for 30 years, still partners in the real estate. And last month we were married 55 years. So it wasn't her, but it was others that I had problems with, that took money, that made bad decisions, that, were uncollaborative. So it is really a difficult situation. I find that it wasn't just me, that my research showed that at that point, 68% of startup failures was because of founder discord. Founders couldn't get along. And I saw that a lot at Fast Start. So often I'd be in our boardroom with a team that was arguing and ultimately would break up. And I would do a mediation trying to save or to exit civilly.
Yeah.
And so often it wasn't the product, wasn't what they're building, but it was how the team worked together or didn't work together is really the key. I mean, so yes, I know it's comfortable and it's fun to do a startup with your friends, people that you trust, but that can be a real problem too. It's more important to bring people on for the right reason.
And I just want to touch on that a little because I came to you for advice not long ago, and you gave me one of the best advice. I said, I am working on this venture with someone that I know. And from my past experience, when there are kind of relationship involved, this is where I really want to make sure everything's black and white to protect our relationship. And you said, I said, what should I do? Or how should I ask? And you said this, be open and just have a very honest conversation. And that was one of the best advice I did because that's what I took it to. And now I went from fearing that, okay, is this partnership going to work? Because I've been through a few, to now I feel good. I feel we're grounded and I feel we're very solid. And I would also presume, you went through a lot of this too in your franchise business because ultimately you're franchising to people, they're learning from you. And I have done enough research and know when the biggest problem with franchisees is they take your license, They take your thing, they try to run it their own way. We had founder of Wahoo's Wing here, Wing Lamb on our show. And he said it's like a marriage. It's also like a marriage. It's like a dating. And if they don't follow what you say and they say they know it, and it falls apart, right? So I'm sure you said 100 stores, 120 stores?
124 franchisees.
120. So let's talk about that.
And I agree with what Wing was saying. In fact, I posted on his recent Instagram, not Instagram, I think it was LinkedIn,
Yeah.
that I agreed 100% in what he was saying. And to give you an idea, my first failure as a first franchisee that failed had been a Marine, a decorated Marine. He went into the NASA program. He became an astronaut. He never made it into space, but he helped to build the systems that are used today. And then he got his doctorate after he got out of NASA, and he was running 2 facilities for Kodak. There's someone that's very smart and very accomplished, yet he failed because as a doctor or an MBA, he thought he knew more about business than what our business was. And maybe he did, but that didn't matter. A franchise is built on best practices. Mm-hmm. And if you're not able to execute on those best practices, you're going to have a failure. And so though this gentleman had the right stuff, of course, being an astronaut, he wouldn't follow the program. And that's what Wing was saying. And it's about, I've turned down, or did turn down, so many people that wanted to buy our franchise, but I thought would not make a good family member, right? Someone who's going to follow the systems. For instance, one of the best franchisees we ever had was an Air Force pilot that then became a commercial airline pilot for Pan American, flew jumbo jets all over the world. When Pan Am closed, he needed to do something on his own. And because he was a systems guy. You can't fly a 747 without trusting systems.
Yeah.
So he trusted our system and became incredibly successful. And that's the way it is. It doesn't matter your background. It matters whether you can commit to the system.
Yeah.
And that's what Wing was talking about. And that's the truth.
And I want to ask you this, like, how did you build the system? You know, in startups, there's always the bootstrap, let's get it together. Everything is messy. And then now it's working. Now we got to put a system in place.
So much of it came from running our stores. So while we were franchising, we still had our own stores that we could test things out. I wouldn't give anything to our franchisees until I proved it out in my own stores. I'm not asking them to invest in anything that I haven't invested in first. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that was instilling confidence in our leadership and our direction and our vision.
So basically you took all the bruises, you took all the fall, you learn all this lesson, you put into a system, and therefore you're able to franchise it out. Because when you're franchising the brand, you're franchising the system and then the business.
Right.
And then I would say to a certain extent, also that mentorship in business.
Yeah, and it's brand reputation.
Yeah.
Right? So brand reputation means so much. An example would be a company called Enron. I don't know if you remember it, but usually when I say Enron, people go, ooh, it's terrible. Yes, Ken Lay, the CEO, and other C-levels went to prison for what they did. Mm-hmm. But Enron is a company of over 10,000 really good employees, bringing energy to hundreds of thousands of people. Enron wasn't bad. Their leadership was bad. But because that leadership was bad, it tainted their brand. And that's the story about how you need to interact with your ultimate customer. Yeah. At the end of the day, if you're not meeting your customer's needs, somebody else will, and you'll be gone.
And I always say this, you know, what you talked about is the brand story. Your leadership and then your identity comes from the top. If you're a founder, if you're a CEO, you set the culture, and therefore you are the brand. And I think Enron is a really, really great example of that. So we have 3 more minutes. So to everyone that is listening, we have founders at all stages. We have founders that are learning startup. We have kids that are in high school, college, and we also have founders that are getting things ready, and they're taking it to market. So what's the one message that you have for them?
Wow. It's hard to unpack that one because for me, it's very complex and many, many messages. Aside from what we talked about is who you build your team around, is flexibility. All right. So Stanford did a study on 3,000 startups that were successful. They had a product, they got into business. And the number one reason for failure was founder discord. And so, again, that just really is impactful. And on the other side of that coin, why I bring this up, because we talked about that a little bit earlier, is the fact that of the 3,000, more than 90% that were successful did not look anything like the first idea. So you have to have enough flexibility to be able to iterate from what you're learning. One of the biggest fallbacks is founder bias. So you're so focused on what you're building, you forget about the problem you're trying to solve. So you many times will discount something that could be beneficial because it takes you away from what you think you should be building. But if you stay connected to your customer's problem, you will always build something in line that value for your customer. And if you're not creating value, you don't have a business.
If you're not creating value, you don't have a business. I will write that down, stick it somewhere, and ask yourself, what problem am I solving? And there's one question I have to ask you. If your life was a movie, what would you title it as?
I love movies. I would, but it comes from books. I would say Lord of the Rings, right? So it is about camaraderie for a purpose, a greater purpose, and it's about overcoming obstacles and giving up of yourself for the greater good. Very much in line, J.R.R. Tolkien, with really foundational core values. And that's a reason why personally I'm so thankful for our people in the armed services. My dad was a Silver Star winner and Purple Heart, and I know through him what valor is and the giving of yourself for a greater purpose. So I use always that as my North Star. Yeah. Are you doing good for others? If you do good for others, you're probably doing good for yourself. So stay focused on doing good for others.
And this is where it's so great to tie it back. Thank you, Michael, for all that you do for the community, for the TCVN community, and really honestly for me, because
thank you.
I'm going to say this on camera. One of my goals is to build a company with a 7-figure exit. There's a lot I'm figuring out. I have failed a lot of times, but that's for another podcast. I've learned leadership because I want to learn. I learn from people like you and from other amazing leaders and founders of what mistakes to avoid now, and then to be able to be here with you. So Michael, if people are trying to connect with you, where can they find you?
Would be michael@faststartstudio.com. Thank you, Lillian.
Yeah. So I will leave his contact info in the show notes. He also has a LinkedIn as well. And for all the listeners that are listening, if you know someone and even yourself that had found value in Michael's amazing advice, please go ahead and share it with a friend, subscribe, like, or even comment if you have questions in our podcast or in our YouTube, wherever you're looking at this, and we will get back to you because we're looking to expand our community. Because at TCVN, our goal is to help founders get funded, but in this journey, it's not so black and white. It is not straight A to Z. Like Michael said earlier, it is non-linear. And we are here, like for me, I always say this, I am a student. I am here to learn. And, you know, when you are surrounded by people that are doing it, you're going to become the next person. And that's why I am here having the honor and privilege to interview Michael today for that reason. So I encourage you guys to join our community. We love to connect, and we will see you in the next episode.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Bye.